you want to tell everybody like how it works, this very simple app that we built?
How it works? Well,
yeah, like what are the 2 things that you can do with this app? Because it's very limited.
Well, you can play and watch yourself as if it's a mirror, and then you can swipe the screen and see the last X amount of time that you pre-choose, 15 seconds, 30 seconds, a minute and a half. And then you can choose to save that or not if you want to at that point. Or you can just have it as the mirror and keep playing, and every time you want to check on something that you did, you can just tap the screen and it'll save it. You can check it later, so you can just keep going. So that's how I like to use it.
I have really been digging this app and have been pumped to talk about it with today's guests. I'm Jason Heath. This is Contrabass Conversations. We're talking today with Susanna Klein and Randall Pharr, who have developed an iOS app called Clipza. It is a really cool way of recording yourself and recording yourself back in time. They'll describe it better than me, but I really dig it. I've been using it every day since discovering it. Susanna is a repeat guest. She has the wonderful Practisma Journal, which we talked about on the podcast, and I went through and did all 16 weeks of it. So I think you're going to dig this. Quick shout out to our sponsors, Dorico, Ear Trumpet Labs, and Upton Bass. More on them later. Let's get into this conversation with Susanna Klein and Randall Pharr. Wow, thanks for taking some time. This is great. I'm loving this app. I have currently 12 clips of me over the last few days. So it's really, it's cool. It's a great idea. Bravo.
Thank you. It's so simple, right?
It's so simple, and it's something I never even thought. I never even realized how useful it is because you don't to like. It's like rather than having the intent of pressing that record button, just having the like. I liked that. Let me check back in. What a cool idea! Wow.
Yeah, I never recorded myself until we started making this app, and I'm like, oh, this is really great, really useful.
Yeah, it's very cool. So bravo. You're just full of good ideas, both of you. But Susanna, I had to dig out, of course, this, which has been on my shelf for the last year plus. So, yeah, and Randall, you're a bass player, right? I saw a bass in your profile pic. So do you know each other through VCU, or is that how you got acquainted?
Yeah, we started VCU at the same time. When was that?
Long time ago. I'm just going to call it the 90s. It was 80s and 90s. Yeah, we were students there together.
Wow. Okay.
And then we were teachers there together too.
Okay. Very cool. Very cool. Where are you at? Are you both at music festivals right now? Is that, if I remember in the email chain, are you on the road or?
So I think Randall, you're in Richmond, right?
I'm at home. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, he's at home. I'm at Wintergreen Music Festival, which is just like 2 hours up the road.
Nice.
So Randall and I, just to get back to your original question, how do we know each other? We kind of have known each other for a long time, but in different iterations. So we were in school together. He was a jazz major. I was a classical major, which, means we can't talk to each other.
Of course.
That's what that means. But he was really one of the only other people who was always in the practice room. We had this practice suite, like up on the 3rd floor at school. And when I got there, Randall was usually already there. So I knew him kind of as a practice hound, as a student. And then I think I told you last time, Jason, I don't know if we talked about it, but my husband is a jazz guy. So Randall and John, my husband, play together a lot. And then Randall was also teaching at VCU, which is where I still teach. He was teaching, adjunct jazz bass. And then we had this conversation one time. I don't know if you remember this, Randall, in my driveway. You and John came back from a gig.
Yeah, I was ready to leave VCU, and I told you what I was going to go to a boot camp, to find a day job to take up the space of what the adjunct was doing for me.
Yeah, and that was kind of like, that was in the back of my head, and I had been looking for, so the genesis of this app was really a research project that I had done in 2018 at VCU, where we at the university kind of created an app just to be able to study musicians' habits. So the directions for the people that were enrolled was, if you're practicing, the app should be open. And the app had like it was very complex, like a metronome, a tuner, all sorts of things. And the idea was we would be privy on the back end to how they were spending their time, how much they were practicing, what kind of habits are associated with reporting pain, or what kind of habits are associated with, feeling good about yourself, which tended to be not that many, actually. That's what I learned. But one of the functionalities, and it was just at that point, we just did it for convenience, was that the players could, if the camera was open, could just tap the screen once and it would kind of clip, a certain amount of time of what they had already done. Then they would go in their files and watch it. So we had sort of integrated that into this larger project, thinking, oh, okay, that'll be convenient. And as it turns out, at the end of it was like a 6-week study, many of the players were like, can I keep the app? I just want to keep it for the recording functionality. Like, I don't care about the journaling and the tracking, all that stuff, but this is a great way to record. And so I kind of knew that there's something appealing there because I was working with students at the time. And then it sat dormantly because I didn't have the time. I couldn't find anybody to work with who also understood music. That was important to me, or performing, I guess. And then during the pandemic, with some extra hands on my time, I was like, what about Randall? And so I was asking my husband, what about Randall? What's he up to? What's he doing? He's like, I don't know. I know he's done with his boot camp. Why don't you stop asking me and start asking Randall?
As someone who's unsuccessfully tried to develop apps for a couple different organizations, like finding a developer that speaks music and that can work with you, and that you can have the budget to make it work, and all sorts of things. I'm thinking back to working with the International Society of Bassists and working on that. It's one of those things that getting an idea like this, and I love this app. It's super cool. That was one of those emails that was so fun to open. I was like, so Susanna's up to something new. What's this? And I immediately clicked it, downloaded it, and did the premium subscription, which is like some extremely affordable amount. And so I've had it on my stand every day since I've been practicing, and it's such a cool. Like, I didn't know this was a problem that needed solving. Like, I have been better at recording, and Susanna, you and I talked about this a year plus ago or whatever. Just I have been getting better at recording myself on my phone or breaking out some good mics once in a while, but it's not. I've been much more consistent with this, and I've already caught, and the video recording aspect of it, I've caught all these habits that I know I've slipped by, especially with all this pandemic practicing and not like playing in public. Like, my jaw's been clenching in this weird way, and I like immediately solve that because it's like, oh, you watch the clip back and I didn't even notice my intonation or my rhythm or anything. It's just like I look slightly angry and my jaw's clenching. And so, it's been a really interesting in the week or whatever I've been using it.
Nice. Randall, you want to tell everybody like how it works, this very simple app that we built? How it works?
Well,
yeah, like what are the 2 things that you can do with this app? Because it's very limited.
Well, you can play and watch yourself as if it's a mirror, and then you can swipe the screen and see the last X amount of time that you pre-choose, 15 seconds, 30 seconds, a minute and a half. And then you can choose to save that or not if you want to at that point. Or you can just have it as the mirror and keep playing. And every time you want to check on something that you did, you can just tap the screen and it'll save it. You can check it later. So you can just keep going. So that's how I like to use it. Just play. I'll just tap it and keep going. So it's pretty versatile in how you want to approach using it too, I think.
We should probably be using a mirror anyway, right? When we're practicing. That's one of those things that I've told pretty much every student I've worked with, and I try to tell myself. And so, yeah, like you're saying, Randall, it's kind of like a mirror if you choose just to use it like that, but it's like this magic mirror because you can press it and go back in time and see. And I've been having fun. I've kept it on the 30-second default, which I believe is the default, but I think I'm going to start playing around today with doing the 15-second. And just sort of see, and maybe even a longer one if I'm doing a run through. But I think the fact that it's simple is an asset. That was probably intentional on your part to keep it simple because it does one thing well, and you're not trying to incorporate a metronome and a tuner and all these other things that we should be doing as well, of course. But I really like how pared down it is and how effective it is at doing that.
Yeah, it's supposed to solve kind of one logistical hurdle and empower people psychologically through solving that, right? But I learned from the research project at VCU is the more complex you make something, the more you have billable hours, you have things that start not working. One affects the other. It's like the more complex you make it, the more difficult it is. And, if people want to use a metronome, I mean, they're probably in metronome mode at that point. Or if somebody has asked me like, well, what if I want to record a whole piece? And my answer is then open your camera app, your regular camera app, and record a whole piece. Like that's not what this app is. This app is really about easy feedback in practice, or catching highlights, at a gig, or if you want something, a lot of people are posting on social media, and having done that myself, I'm kind of frustrated by the process of like, okay, now I'm going to set up the camera, and I'm going to try to get a halfway decent take so that I don't embarrass myself. Well, that's not even authentic, and it takes away my practice time. I would much rather, have something where I'm using it anyway for deliberate practice, and I'm like, oh, that was actually pretty decent. I can put that out in the world and feel good about it, without the posting taking such a production value.
I'm so happy that my course, Beginners Classical Bass, is out in the world on Discover Double Bass, and we've been getting some great feedback. Here's Barry Green, instructor of bass at The Ohio State University, former principal bassist of the Cincinnati Symphony, and author of The Inner Game of Music. Barry writes about the course. This wonderful, extensive course includes 14 chapters of 66 lessons, varying in length from 1 to 8 minutes each. It is so comprehensive. While it is called a beginner's course, this only means that the course begins with the parts of the instrument, including how to take the bass out of the case. However, it also takes the player through the most advanced left and right hand techniques, including shifting, pivoting, harmonics, positions up to the thumb position, tuning the bass, scales and arpeggios, as well as left hand techniques of dynamics, bow placement, articulations, including portato, staccato, and slurring. Barry, thank you so much. And folks, if you haven't checked it out, you can find it through the link in the show notes, or just visit discoverdouble.bass.com/Jason Heath. When you've built a reputation like Upton Bass has, the stakes are so high when you send out an instrument to a new owner.
When people open that crate, man, the bar is so high. It doesn't matter if it's a $2,000 laminate bass or it's a $20,000 one-off. The bar is so high. Maybe because of the amount of time we've been doing it, the awards on the wall, the gossip, the reputation, the marketing. But by the time they are opening their crate, they are invested so much into us. They are expecting the world, and we have to meet that expectation every single time.
That's Eric Roy of Upton Bass, and boy, do they meet those expectations that people set. Yes, the bar is high, but it's high because of the quality of work they've done over the years. They stand behind their products, and they have so many loyal fans, including me. Check them out at uptonbass.com, and thank you so much for sponsoring the podcast. That's another thing that this solves that is really cool. It's like built for those who are TikToking or posting on Instagram. Like, so many people have practice channels, and it's a great way. And I think that there's some real benefits to that too. And people seem to really get it can be a positive thing and an accountability thing. And so it's just built for that without the hassle of what you're describing of, got to get the angle right, got to do this, got to do that.
Right. Or, the first take problem. Do you know what I mean? You set up the camera, you do your first take, and it's like, oh God, that wasn't it. But what do you do now? You stop the file or not? Now you do another one. It's like, we generally know when we have something that we're halfway proud of. Do you know what I mean? We don't need to be starting and stopping and going through big files and that kind of thing. So, what I found is that, we just launched, so it's a little early to tell, but what I find is that everybody uses it in a different way. Like in teaching, often I'll use the 15-second default because I'm using it usually to show a student after the fact, something that they did that I want to talk about, right? So I'll just be tapping the screen. I'll catch up, I don't know, let's say 6 or 7 15-second clips. And then at the end of their run through, we can go through those and I can actually show them what I'm getting ready to talk about. But, if somebody's posting on social media, they'll probably do the 90 seconds because, they want to take the full 60 seconds. They might have to trim a little bit. So that's different. And I tend to use the swipes in practice a lot, just the replays. And I know Randall does the taps a lot. That's something we just discovered. It's like we were using, just the two people that were involved in building it had a preference for one over the other, which is
the taps are what saves it, but doesn't immediately play it back. And the swipe will immediately play it back, right?
Right. So a swipe is kind of like, the
Right.
podcast thing where it's like 30 seconds back. That's the swipe. It's like basically show me right now what I did. And then you can set it to auto save those or auto delete those if you want. Like mine is always set to auto delete because I'm just using it for practice. You can override it. You can say save anyway, The tap is just, you want to capture it, but you don't want to engage in it right then. You don't want to see how you did. You're in the groove. You want to keep going. And then at the end of whatever your practice session or your gig or whatever it is that you're, filming, you can go back and see what you did. Kind of bigger picture
Well,
stuff.
I love it. I got to start playing around with it. I knew that there was the tap option. I've only been doing the swipe, but I think today, because what I like to do a lot of the time is record myself, and then as I'm packing up at the end of the day, kind of like have that going and just like listening and reflecting. So I think I'm going to try that today. That's a great idea. And again, simple functionality, but it's cool because those are two real different modes. If you're in the like analyze right back at the moment, oh, let me fix this, let me look at it, let me see a big picture versus like let me just really dig down to those highlights those moments I wanted to engage with later. Smart. Mm-hmm. That's a great feature. Well, I can't wait to, I know that you can do the upsizing on the iPad right now, and it sounds like you have a version for the iPad in the works. I'm finally getting back to in-person teaching. So I'm going to try putting my iPad on a stand with my student and then trying what you're describing to just do some instant replays and see yeah, what a cool feature. Randall, let me ask you, how has it been getting into, are you a software developer now at this point? Is that what's replaced some of that work? What's it been like getting into that?
Well, I feel a bit more like one right now since we've been working so hard on this past 4 or 5 months. But it's always been a hobby for me since I was 12, about 1982-ish. I got a Commodore 64 for Christmas or something, and my sister and I, enjoyed learning how to code. So every number of years, I kind of check back in and how does that work? I'm always curious how computers work and video games and all that stuff. But I never just enjoyed music much more try to pursue the computers. So now I'm 51, and the adjunct college work just takes up so much of my time that it pays well by the hour, but not enough hours, and I have to set aside all that time every few months and say, yeah, I'll do that. But, I can make so much more money doing this kind of work. But then that was before COVID. So now that COVID's happened, I don't know what's going to happen. I like this process. This was kind of organic how it came up. We'll see how this goes. And if I can come up with a great idea of my own, I'll make my own iPhone app at some point.
And I mean, you started doing gigs again, right? Gigs were starting.
Yeah. It's coming back. What the future of that's going to be, but still, I have to be much more patient for the gigs. It's not like I was working before. I was working 5 or 6 times a week, and now it's like maybe this week I'll get a gig.
And as someone who I've spent my fair share of years in adjunct university spots, I would stints up in Wisconsin and in Chicago. I fully understand swapping that out. Although there are a lot of positives that I fully get swapping that out for something.
Yeah. I mean, I loved what I was doing. I just it's just too much time.
I mean, that's how I got lucky. I mean, in terms of the pandemic, because I had been looking for somebody, to help me with this project, a developer. But it was so small and people were so busy that, it was difficult to find people. It's difficult to find freelancers in developer world, as you said, to begin with. And because the pandemic hit and because I knew my husband was sitting on the couch with no gigs, do you know what I mean? I was like, wait a minute. What about Randall? Could he take this on? You know what I mean? So it was worked out fortuitously for me, for my project, but it was a rough year. We put it to some good use.
Well, it's great to reconnect with you, Susanna, here, because we talked right at the absolute beginning of the pandemic. I think it was like we might have even scheduled it before everything shut down. So, and then I went through many months of Practisma, and so it's great to reconnect. And here's a question that's probably impossible to answer, but I'm just going to throw it out there anyway. And I know my academic job holding friends or other people would would appreciate, they'd probably yell at me if I didn't ask it, but like a lot of people have ideas for projects, and many fewer of those projects actually come to fruition than there are ideas. And you, in the span of time I've known you, I'm holding two of your ideas right here, this app and practice. And so as somebody, and I have at least a sense of probably what your load outside of these entrepreneurial projects is like with the university, and you're at a music festival now. So like, how have you been able to get these projects launched out in the world? Or maybe a better question is like, what advice might you have for somebody out there who's got something that they've been thinking about doing, and maybe it's been sitting on their idea deck for like 2 years, 5 years, or whatever. But like, how do you do it, or what advice do you might have? And apologize for the tough question, but
be persistent. Don't give up. Also, don't try to squeeze blood out of a turnip. Like this app, I had this in mind after the research, couldn't find anybody, a lot of cold trails. I would talk to somebody who knew somebody, et cetera. And then eventually I was like, okay, it's just not going to happen right now. But I kind of kept it on it was back there, and I would write it into sort of my annual plan for myself. Like, I want to do this. And just keep talking to people. I think that's really important. Who do they know? Who else could connect them, even if it's just kind of talking through the idea. And don't be afraid. I mean, I should not say that. Be afraid and do it anyway.
Yeah.
Do it anyway.
Yeah. I mean, this little app, it's like, there is this moment. I think, Randall, you had this too, right? Where you're like, oh my God, what are we doing? What if, we launch it, people hate it.
All the blind spots were scaring me. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And
this episode is brought to you by Ear Trumpet Labs. They make an incredible mic for upright bass called the Nadine, and 6-time Grammy-winning jazz bassist and former Contrabass Conversations guest, Christian McBride, is a big fan. Christian says, as an acoustic bassist, it's very important for me to have this instrument amplified as naturally as possible. What I love about this microphone is that it makes the instrument sound exactly how I hear it in my head. Honestly, I don't know if you can get a better review than that. The Nadine is an instrument-mounted condenser mic with an incredibly clear, natural sound and great feedback rejection. Ear Trumpet Labs is offering a free t-shirt with mic purchase from their website. Just visit www.eartrumpetlabs.com/contrabass to claim yours and learn more about Nadine. This episode is brought to you by Dorico. And one of the things that struck me about Dorico when I first opened it up was this innovative user interface design. There are 5 different modes. There is setup, write, engrave, play, and print mode. And here is Senior Product Manager Daniel Spreberry on why they set it up like this.
As they are presented to you on the screen, they're kind of there in a strip at the top left-hand corner of the screen, and they're very prominent. You can whack them with your mouse, or if you're using a Surface, you can tap them with your finger, and that basically then changes the whole UI of the program.
It is such an innovative design. It makes working for me so much cleaner in music notation software. I have become such a fan. I use this piece of software every single day. Check them out at Dorico.com. That'll take you to their page on Steinberg's website. And there's a free version, Dorico SE, that'll let you do practically everything the program does with up to 2 parts. So that's perfect if you're working with a student or making exercises or that kind of thing. Thank you so much for sponsoring the podcast, Dorico. Yeah, I think that's I wouldn't worry about that fear. I don't think there's anything to hate. I think the app's awesome, and I love the model. You get so many great features for free, and you have a very modest, one time per. You're not getting a lot.
Yeah, it's a one time.
Yeah, you're not getting stuck into yet another subscription along with Netflix and Hulu and the other and Adobe Creative Cloud and all the other things I subscribe to. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, that was on purpose because I don't need to make like a lot of money in this. I mean, we need to pay for our time a little bit. We can't, there's only so much time you can devote to these things for free. But yeah, I never wanted a subscription. But yeah, just, be afraid and do it anyway. I mean, that was kind of how the book came about too. It was interesting, actually. I did the research first with the app, the software development, and it was because precisely the technology part stalled because I'm not a coder. I mean, I know about code. I've learned a little bit, but like Randall will tell you, like, keep me far away from that as possible. But because that really, stalled, and I had been doing all this psychological work, I'd been doing journaling with my students, then I was like, okay, what can I do? And interestingly enough, the university had said, if you ever want to develop technology based on this research that you had done, you need to have like your own company. You need to have like a separate entity, and then we'll be glad to license that back to you so you can do with it what you want, because it's your research. So I did that for the technology. Then I couldn't find anybody to help me, and it stalled. And so I was like, well, let me publish this book that I've also been kind of working on for 10 years. I was like, let me just start with something, and then you just get a little braver about like, hey, I'm doing this thing and who likes it? And, some people will like your stuff and some people will be like, this is stupid. And that's okay. It's just part of sort of being more resilient and, practicing getting out there. But I used to be I used to sweat emails a lot more, or calling somebody. It's like, oh, I don't know them. And what am I going to say? And I'm nobody. And now I'm like, hey, you don't know me from Adam, but somebody mentioned your name and blah, 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 blah. So you kind of get better at that. It's like becoming better at being on stage.
You definitely get better than that, better at that rather. And I found that to be the case in my life too. I like every once in a while I stop and I look at the outreach I'm doing or something like that. And I think Jason from 20 years ago would have like never, contacted the people I'm contacting, but it's like a muscle that you just develop.
Yes, that's a great way to describe it. It's a muscle, and you get a little thicker skinned, and you know that you're always going to be a little bit afraid. Like that's kind of part of it. And you just kind of do it anyway. And I think I'm starting to like the risk of it. I don't know. It's weird. It's like, I didn't at all in the beginning. I just kind of liked making stuff, but I think I'm starting to like, I don't know. It's like a roller coaster.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Got a little bit of a thrill to it. I mean, and you do this with, your publishing, now your podcast. I mean, I have like three things in the fire. You have like 12.
Yeah, I mean, you just have to get in the groove and just know that a lot of ideas are bad or they won't go anywhere, and the things that'll succeed, you might not be the things that you think are the best, and it's a wild ride for sure. But I appreciate what you both have done with this, and I'm going to recommend it to everybody, and it's a no-brainer. So thank you for reaching out. And even though I subscribe, the reason I found out about it is because I subscribed to your email newsletter. But even though I follow you on all social media, I might still have missed it. So I think reaching out to people is just such a beautiful thing. And I think you just said, hey, do you want to give it a shout out of your newsletter? I thought I would love to just chat about it too and put it out in the podcast and obviously in the newsletter. Right. So thank you for getting in touch. This is, I love to reconnect thanks. And Randall meet you too anyway. So it's great.
Yeah. Bass connections. Because bassists are cool people. Always comes back to that.
Well, it definitely made me smile to open up the app and see that your collaborator in this was holding a bass in the photo. I thought, well, it was destined for the podcast then. So
awesome. My son is a bass player too, right? Like electric.
I remember you telling me that. Yeah. Okay. So you're surrounded.
Yeah, he's threatening to pursue it seriously. Okay. So I have to deal with that.
Yeah. Well, that's okay. Susanna, Randall, thanks so much for chatting, and definitely check out Clipza. We got it linked up to in the show notes, or just search for it in the iOS store. And wow, love this app. Susanna is somebody that I find quite inspiring, and it's so cool to see people who are innovative like this. And I did bring this up, I believe, in this conversation, but to see people that are in an academic position where maybe it wouldn't have to be innovating like this and creating practice journals like we talked about last year, or creating this app. And I have been using this app every day, planning on doing some sort of YouTube video review of it. The YouTube stuff can take a ton of time to figure out how to do convincingly or compellingly or effectively or whatever the word is. And so I have to gnaw on these things for a while sometimes. Like that Practisma journal, going through that last year. I filmed all 16 weeks, and then I think I took another like 16 weeks to even sit down and edit it. And once I got into it, I think it was just a few days, but sometimes it just takes me time. I'm working on a few projects like that, working on something for String Virtuoso, digging into that, working on, I don't even know, Music, this app I've been using, a lot of apps that I've been using. I discovered, pardon me, I'm still getting over this stinking cold. If you've listened to the last few episodes, you've maybe heard that or me talk about that. And of course, I record these in batches. So though it's a couple weeks for you, it's just 20 minutes later for me doing this. But I have done several reviews of things like Fourscore, apps like that. And of course, sometimes those do very well on YouTube. And then that is a little bit compelling to me to make more of them. But I have to remember, what am I doing here? Do I want to be like an app review person, or do I want to talk about the bass and related things? And that's really more of what I want to do. So the problem is I'll put out something on Fourscore or Camera Gear and it'll get 30,000 views or 50,000 views. And I'll be like, oh, I should do more of that. I want more of those views. And then of course I'll put out something bass related that I spend hours and hours and hours working on, and it'll get like 800 views, which I'm thankful for those 800. Thank you so much. But it's one of those things I have to be careful just personally, because I've put out a bunch of things that have done well that aren't really bass related, but my channel, apparently I'm talking about YouTube here on a podcast. Oh well, my channel is so bass centric, and I like that I have to remember I put out something like that, and then a bunch of people come and then they care about nothing, or they care about like 2% of what I do. So, some people would pivot and they would say, oh, I'm going to review apps and do that sort of thing. But I have so many projects in my life that and again, this is like, it sounds like humble brag. It's not. I'm just trying to be honest here. I have so many things I'm working on, and I feel like I barely have enough time to do the podcast or do these sort of videos. And I don't know that I kind of enjoy this niche or whatever that I'm living in, and I don't want to necessarily become the app review person or the whatever. So so I sort of resist. Anyway. Boy, I'm rambling here. Sorry about that. I will try to wrap this up here quickly. But I do have some apps that I'm passionate about that I'm using every day, like Music, Clipza. I've talked about Fourscore before. I've talked about Audacity many, many times. These are things that I use. I'm a bass player, so hopefully that will be of interest to other people. And podcasts like this, they reach a certain audience, but podcasting is more of it's deeper. It's harder to connect with a bunch of people about something like an app. So in a 3-minute and 55-second way, as I'm looking at the timer here, way of saying I'm probably going to put something video related out about this as well. Thank you for listening. I start to lose it as I do these intros and outros, and this is the 8th piece of content I've recorded in a row here. Maybe it shows, but I really appreciate you listening to this. I am having a great time doing the podcast and continuing to do the podcast, and it has been a source of enjoyment and learning and development over the years I've been doing it. I appreciate you being on the journey, whether it's episode 1 or episode 820 or whatever this episode is. Thank you for listening. If you want to reach out, feedback at contrabassconversations.com will put you in touch with me. If you're not on our email list, join us, contrabassconversations.com. You can get the links to that, social media, and all of that. Thank you to the team that helped me put this podcast together. Excuse me. They are Michael Cooper, Steve Hinchy, Mitch Mooring, and Trevor Jones. Mitch makes beautiful, award-winning basses in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. Learn more at mitchmooring.com. I'm your host, Jason Heath, and we will see you again soon for more life on the low end of the spectrum.